The honourable member for Elmwood-Transcona.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I too would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the Minister's birthday today and wish her the best. And hopefully she can have a much better celebration in one of the nights to come, because this is not a great way to be able to celebrate your birthday. With that being said, Canada's rail system has been central to the development of this country. With some 48,000 kilometers of track, enough to go around the world. We have one of the largest rail networks on the globe. Rail has connected Canadians to each other, and by transporting Canadian goods to markets is crucial to our economic prosperity. Some 70% of our surface freight moves by rail, including bulk commodities such as agricultural and forestry products, minerals, and energy products, including oil. In recent years, more than 40% of our gross domestic product has been generated by bulk commodities. We use rail to move what are called dangerous goods, goods that play a vital role in the North American economy, but which are substances that could pose a threat to people or the environment. These shipments include oil and gas. Such shipments move routinely and safely across Canada every day by rail without incident. Canadians depend on many of these goods to go about their daily lives. In fact, more than 30 million shipments of dangerous goods are transported annually in this country. And let me note again, almost all their destinations are reached without incident. However, this past summer, a tragic incident did occur. On July 6th, an unmanned Montreal, Maine, and Atlantic train containing crude oil derailed in Lac-Mégantic, Quebec. The explosion and fire that followed killed 47 people, caused significant damage to the town, and released more than 5 million liters of crude oil. The events in Lac-Mégantic underline the ongoing need for rail safety, and an on-site investigation was immediately launched by the Transportation Safety Board of Canada. The TSB provides an extremely valuable service to the government and Canadians. It operates independently of the government and makes recommendations following investigations into transportation incidents. Earlier this year, the TSB made interim recommendations based on its ongoing investigation into the tragic Lac-Mégantic incident. Our government took decisive action to address the TSB recommendations. Just recently, the Minister of Transport directed her department to further strengthen rail safety in Canada by removing the least crash-resistant DOT 111 tank cars from service, requiring DOT 111 tank cars that do not meet the standard published in January 2014 in Canada Gazette, Part 1, or any other future standard to be phased out within 3 years. Requiring emergency response assistance plans for even a single tank car containing crude oil, gasoline, diesel, aviation fuel, and ethanol. And by creating a task force that brings municipalities, first responders, railways, and shippers together to strengthen emergency response capacity across the country, and by requiring railway companies to reduce the speed of trains carrying dangerous goods and implement other key operating practices. However, I should note, given the integration of Canada and U.S. rail networks, rail cars cross the border both ways every day. We also require a North American solution. When it comes to developing a new standard for rail cars, we do not exist in isolation and must consider our training partners in the United States. As such, the Minister of Transport continues to work with her American counterpart to accelerate the development of even more stringent standards in keeping with the TSB recommendations. In addition, here in Parliament, the Minister has asked the Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure and Communities to review safety management systems for railways and the transport of dangerous goods. I mention this because I want to point out that Canada has in fact paid attention to safety in rail transportation, and those who say otherwise need to examine the facts. In addition to the actions I have mentioned, our government is also taking other steps to address this important issue. On sharing TDG information with municipalities, the Minister has stated that our government remains committed to a two-way dialogue and information exchange with key transportation stakeholders in communities across Canada. A protective direction was issued to make sure this happened. On classification of dangerous goods, the Minister announced a directive to ensure that all crude oil being transported be properly tested and classified, and that results be sent to Transport Canada. This provides Transport Canada with an additional means to monitor industry compliance and focus our efforts for the greatest safety benefit of Canadians. When you look at all these actions together, you can see that our government is taking an approach that is similar to the world-class tanker safety initiative that we developed for marine transportation. It focuses on prevention, response, and liability. Our government is committed to rail safety, and prior to this tragedy, took numerous other actions to strengthen it. It is worth noting some of them. In 2009, we increased funding to ensure a permanent rail inspectorate of over 100 positions nationally. By last spring, Transport Canada had 101 railway safety inspectors and 35 dangerous goods inspectors, and have implemented a new aggressive staffing plan to increase oversight capacity. For example, between April 1st, 2012 and March 31st, 2013, rail safety inspectors conducted more than 30,000 inspections. Our government has also invested more than $100 million in the rail safety system. We have also taken legislative steps. Last year, final amendments to the Railway Safety Act went into effect, providing the authority to introduce new regulations to strengthen safety and oversight programs. These new regulations include increased fines for companies that break rules, require rail carriers to submit environmental management plans, create whistleblower protection for employees with safety concerns, and call for rail companies to have an executive legally responsible for safety. I want to also note other measures we took immediately following the events in Lac-Mégantic. The Minister of Transport directed her department to issue an emergency directive to rail companies with 5 requirements. 2 operators at all times for trains carrying dangerous goods. All cabins must be locked. All reversers removed from locomotives. Ensure that all brakes are properly applied on all locomotives, and no trains can be left unattended without new strict conditions. Our government made these rules permanent. These actions would build on steps that Transport Canada is also taking to bolster the safety of our rails and the transportation of dangerous goods. To this end, we have said that we will work to enhance the collection of safety data and the tools to analyze safety risks, and improve and expand the fleet of vehicles used to assess rail tracks, improve how information about dangerous goods shipments is shared with municipalities, conduct research to support safety technologies and promote a culture of safety in the rail industry, and continue to work with communities across Canada and groups such as the Federation of Canadian Municipalities to further support the work of municipal emergency preparedness officials and first responders. We also continue to strengthen rail safety through other actions. That is why, even before the investigations into this tragedy were completed, the Minister directed officials in her department to speed up development and implementation of regulations that reflect recent amendments to the Railway Safety Act. In doing so, there are several questions we need to consider. For example, do our current regimes and options adequately reflect risks of transporting crude oil and other dangerous goods? As we did in developing the world-class tanker safety regime, should we reassess the liability and compensation regime for rail transport to better protect victims, the environment, and taxpayers? Given the integration of the Canada-US rail network, and in order to improve rail efficiency together, we should work to develop new continental cooperation on rail safety. As I noted earlier, we are already doing some of these. As a first step, the Canadian Transportation Agency is reviewing its insurance assessment criteria and will take actions permitted under existing legislation. As well, Transport Canada will review how much insurance may be required in order to adequately compensate people and pay for cleanups after accidents. From that, we expect to bring forward options to improve this regime and ensure it adequately reflects the risks of transporting crude and other dangerous goods. Beyond what government can do with its own powers, we must also encourage transportation business to encourage a culture of safety in their everyday operations, the sense among employees that they can all contribute to safe operations. By accomplishing this, these businesses can maintain government's trust and have confidence that we will support their enterprise. In conclusion, let me make a couple of key points. First, railway safety regulations exist to ensure the safety and protection of the public. If these regulations are not followed, we will not hesitate to act, and if companies do not properly classify the goods they transport, they may be prosecuted under the Transportation of Dangerous Goods Act. And second, Canada does have a robust and safe transportation system, one in which we can have confidence. The facts demonstrate that Canada is pursuing rail safety and that our record has improved in recent years. However, events in Lac-Mégantic remind us that we must remain committed to strengthening rail safety. To do so, we will learn from recent events and work with all stakeholders in rail transportation to ensure the safety of our rail system for Canadians. We recognize that there is still some work to do and remain committed to working with the rail industry, governments, and partners such as the Federation of Canadian Municipalities to improve safety of our rail and transportation of dangerous goods systems. With that, Mr. Chair, I have a question that I would like to give for the Minister, and I was wondering if the Minister could comment on whether, in light of what I've said in my speech here, on whether she is confident in the direction we are taking and whether it will maintain the safety of our transportation and trade system.
Minister of Transport.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the comments and the review of all that we've accomplished and all that we've tried to do with respect to rail safety over the past number of years. Of course, we can always do better. We'll always strive to do better, Mr. Chair, and we'll continue to take that path at Transport Canada. That being said, I am satisfied with the reaction that we've been receiving to all of these protective directions or emergency orders or regulations that we're putting in place or that we're announcing. And if I could just take a moment to show that it's not just internally that we should be happy with ourselves, that externally we have heard from people like Claude Dauphin, President of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, who said FCM applauds the federal government's response to the tragedy in Lac-Mégantic and to the rail safety recommendations that emerged from it. He went on to say the government's commitment to increase the safety of transportation of dangerous goods and to require shippers and railways to carry additional assurance directly responds to calls from FCM's National Rail Safety Work Group. As well, Mr. Chair, I think it's important to note that Rebecca Blakey, who's the NDP president, said on April 23rd in response to our comments to the Transportation Safety Board, I think this is a step in the right direction. She said she was glad to see the government taking action. The member for Brassard-La Prairie also said, I think this is a good move. It is a step in the right direction. The 3-year period is the best thing that can be done. The Mayor of Lac-Mégantic, with whom we have a very good relationship, a respectful one, it's important for us to consult with her as she is the center of so much of what's been happening recently in rail safety, said she was satisfied with the new measures from the federal government. The chair of the Transportation Safety Board said she was encouraged by our strong response to the board recommendations. And Claude Dauphin said as well, too, the new safety measures announced today respond directly to our call for concrete action and are another major step forward improving the safety of Canada's railways and the communities around them. I also want to thank the Canadian Association of Fire Chiefs, who commended us for requiring emergency response assistance plans for the shipment of crude oil, ethanol, and other flammable liquids by rail, because it's something that they asked for. And we thank them, and we continue are encouraged by the fact that they'll work with us on this matter as we continue to move forward.
The honourable member for Elmwood-Transcona, you have about a minute and a half left of your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you, Mr. Chair, I'd request if the Minister could also expand on the regulatory changes that you announced last month in response to the TSB's interim findings on the Lac-Mégantic tragedy.
Transport, you have just about exactly a minute.
Well, Mr. Chair, what I will tell you is this, is that we acted decisively on April 23, and we made our recommendations and responses to the Transportation Safety Board. Today, the U.S. Department of Transport has brought in their emergency actions, which mirror ours in some cases. But what I can tell you is that in comparison with the Canadian position, Canada's actions go further than both of the advisories that the U.S. has put out today.